Well, hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Polyester Giants, where we talk to members of the San Francisco Giants teams from between 1977 and 1982, when, in my humble opinion, they wore the best uniforms in team history. Our very first guest began his career in the Giants in 1982, arguably the most exciting Giants season during these polyester jersey era. He would go on to pitch in 159 major league games, 131 of those with the San Francisco Giants. He was technically an all-star in his rookie season of 1982, and we'll ask Bill a little bit more about that in a minute, as well as being named the Topps National League Rookie Pitcher of the Year. And today he makes his home in the Bay Area and is the host of the very popular radio show Extra Innings with Bill Laskey on KMBR 680 AM. So it's with great pleasure to welcome to the Polyester Giants podcast, Bill Laskey. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and for the distinction of being our very first guest.
Scott, a pleasure to be on with you. And I see all those uniforms behind you. It brings back a lot of memories. And you're absolutely right. They were very colorful back then. And a lot of times we wore the black jersey on the road when we go to Atlanta, Cincinnati, and Philadelphia, the most humid cities, and we'd be wearing black. But at that time, we didn't know better. We wore what they gave us.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a distinction there. I want to dig in with you a little bit here as we move along, but I will say I do own some of these. I wore one to a game in Wrigley Field, and it was one of those 90 degrees feels like 104 days, and man, there's not a lot of breathing going on, but they look good nonetheless.
They sure did. And my rookie year, any big league jersey at that time, I was excited to wear. As you said, I came up in a trade with the San Francisco Giants when I was pitching with Kansas City Royals. Rich Gale and myself got traded to Jerry Martin. And my first year, I started in AAA, and they called me up 2 weeks into the season, and it was one of my best years of my career.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk to you a little bit more about those and relive some of those memories. But let's maybe start back at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what are some of your earliest memories of the game of baseball?
Well, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and a city where, Steve Stone, Fred Zahn, some pitchers that were ahead of me. So I didn't have any direction of where to go when I got to a possibility of being in pro baseball. I played at a public school. I played basketball and baseball in high school, enjoyed both sports. But I saw myself my sophomore and junior year getting better. The arm was throwing harder. I was getting more accurate in my throws. And I saw something that other pitchers didn't have. And I started working the craft a little bit more my junior year and got to pitch my junior year in high school as one of the top pitchers. And of course, my senior year, everything came together. I was most valuable player in the city of Toledo. I was 9-1 with a .41 earned run average. Nobody hit me. I struck out a lot of people. Had a slider back in the day, but I didn't know it was a slider. It was a spinner, I thought. It worked and had a lot of colleges inquire about me. And one of the biggest things I always told my parents is I wanted to continue to pitch. And everywhere I went, when I went to a four-year school from Ohio State, University of Michigan, Western Michigan, University of Toledo, everybody wanted to redshirt me back then. Now, that was in the mid 70s. So they didn't really think that as a freshman in college you could pitch. And I wanted to pitch. I told my parents, I don't care where I go. And sure enough, a Monroe Community College, a very small junior college between Detroit and Toledo, got a hold of me and they said, you could come here and pitch. And I jumped to the point of doing it. And it really landed me a lot of scouts coming to junior colleges to watch me pitch. And Detroit Tigers drafted me twice, but they didn't give me anything assuring. It was more or less come sign, come here, come here. And I didn't want to do that. And my parents wanted me to go to college to get a degree. And that opened the doors for Kansas City Royals to draft me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, being drafted, ironically, twice in the same year, they had they had multiple drafts in the same year back at that time, and including once in the first round. And not signing, I'm sure that did take a little bit of courage. But as you mentioned, the next year, in 1978, you get drafted again, second round by the Kansas City Royals. And then it seemed over the next 4 years or so, you made a pretty fairly swift progression through their system, just continually moving up, eventually spending that 1980 and 81 season in AAA with Omaha. I mean, did it kind of feel like at that point, you're taking steps forward every year? Did you feel like you were kind of on the cusp of getting a shot at the major leagues with Kansas City?
I did, and I was on the 40-man roster. I ended up going to spring training, big league camp with them a couple times. My final year in Omaha, I had one of my best years there. But when you looked at the starting staff the Royals had, and they ended up going to the World Series and playoffs, it seemed like every year Dennis Leonard, Paul Splitoff, Rich Gale, I mean, Larry Gura, they had a starting staff. It was impeccable. It was very good. And they had a very good team to follow up on it. So I never had an agent. I was always that guy that said, "Oh, I don't need an agent. I don't need an agent." Don Hood, who ended up being with the Cardinals, and he was in Omaha one year, said, "You need to get an agent. You need to find out if other teams want you." And I ended up getting the Hendricks brothers, Alan Hendricks and Randy Hendricks. They were really an agent for pitchers. They had Roger Clemens, Mike Scott. They had a whole bundle of pitchers. So I ended up signing with them, and that winter, they talked to me about, would you get traded? Would you want to go somewhere else? And my answer, Scott, is I want to get to the big leagues. I wanted to be somewhere else than to be a AAA pitcher. So, sure, it turns out where I go play winter ball, and I played in Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Colombia, and I got traded that winter when I was playing in Venezuela. And no one got a hold of me. Nobody knew how to get a hold of me. They got a hold of my parents, and my parents ended up sending me a telegram saying you were traded to the San Francisco Giants. That's how I found out. Even the Giants didn't even know I was playing in Venezuela. But it all turned out great. I ended up going to spring training. Frank Robinson was the manager, and he gave me a good look. But they were loaded also with a lot of free agents, and they had signed a couple veterans. Ended up going to AAA. Alan Folks ended up hurting his elbow, and I got called up. And it was a surprise. I had pitched only 2 games in AAA, but it was a day and a memory I'll never forget.
Yeah, yeah, but I can't believe they didn't just text you or send you an email to let you know back in
Back in
those
the day,
days.
they
It
didn't
didn't
have
happen.
that, Scott.
It's hard to believe.
We're talking 1980s,
Oh my gosh. And you
they had no idea. They just contacted my parents saying, well, we'd like to talk to Bill. And my mom said, well, he's not here. Where is he? He's in Venezuela. So it was kind of really? He's playing winter ball? But, when you look at a winter ball, it was a lot of direction to pitch against big league players. And a lot of the Latin players played because that was their home city. That was the time when they came home and performed in front of their hometown. So that's what was great about it. I played on a team with Dave Concepcion as a player manager. We had Bo Diaz behind the plate. So many talented Latin players that played back in Venezuela wasn't there.
So you touched on this a little bit of just, wanting the opportunity, but and it's funny, I was going to ask you where were you when you got traded? I was not expecting you to say Venezuela, but what was your reaction to that news? One, of being traded, and two, of coming to San Francisco. What did you know about the team at that time?
I didn't know anything. To tell you the truth, I was from Ohio. I grew up there. I played in Kansas City. We always worked out in Florida. Arizona was where the Giants were. Of course, you knew Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Juan Marichal. But at that point, I had no clue about the organization. I didn't know who was on their roster. When I got the telegram, I sat down with 2 or 3 different players that play with different teams, and we just started looking at some of the teams the Giants had. And I saw an opportunity of possibly making that pitching staff. And it did happen in 82 once the season got going. But back then you didn't have all the information. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't just pick up the phone and call people. So it was a lot of information from other players that I played with. And we just kind of gelled in and talking about it. And of course I was excited, but I was locked into Venezuela till the middle of January to the end of January. So I couldn't do
Wow.
anything or even talk to the Giants until I got home.
Wow. And then, did you when you did and coming into camp, did they give you any indication of what their plans were for you, or that you maybe had a shot at making the team, or was it just you showed up and played like everybody else?
Well, Rich Gale was with me, so they had Rich Gale pencil in for the rotation. He was pitching fourth, fifth starter in the Royals, so they had him in front of me. I was more or less an insurance package. They got rid of Jerry Martin. The Royals ended up picking him up to be an outfielder. And at that time, I really didn't know anything. But after I got traded to the Giants, the Royals made another trade where they got Craig Chamberlain, Atlee Hammaker, Brad Wellman, and that's when Vita Blue and Bob Tufts ended up going to the Royals. So there was some faces and people I knew in camp from where? The Kansas City Royals.
Yeah.
So it was a bundle of players. Atlee, of course, was one of my best friends even when I was with Kansas City Royals. So it was good to see him. and we ended up pitching together for a few years in the early 80s.
Yeah, and there's it's funny with the Royals. There's another team that continually came up for you that we'll talk about as we get through this. It just was crazy how often it kept circling back. So as you mentioned, didn't make the team out of spring training, but you did get called up April 23rd, 1982. You make your major league debut against arch rival and oh by the way, defending world champion Los Angeles Dodgers. The game itself was a little forgettable. I think the Giants lost 9-0. But if I read the box score correctly, you faced three batters, gave up a double to Steve Garvey, no shame in that. Walked Mike Scioscia, but intentionally walked him intentionally. But you got Bill Russell to ground into an inning double play. So you did your job that day. But just how did it feel to finally be in the big leagues?
Yeah, and Frank had called me in, and Don McMahon was my pitching coach, and said, "Hey, we know you're a starting pitcher, but we'd like to get you an inning into the big leagues before we give you that start." And I never came out of the bullpen. I was a starting pitcher, so going down to the bullpen, warming up, and it was something totally different. And I had an opportunity just to get in, get my feet wet, and the sinker and the slider that I threw got the ground ball out. And then next thing I know, it was a Wednesday afternoon game, and they had penciled me in to pitch against the Expos, and that was really my first big start. And man, everything worked well that day.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the Expos, and yeah, I would say it went pretty well. Complete game shutout, three hits allowed, one walk. You faced four hitters above the minimum, and you get your first big league hit in RBI. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you
Well,
had a
Bill
little bit of heads
Gullickson,
up.
another friend of mine, Bill Gullickson, who I ended up going through the minor leagues competing against, and I ended up pushing one in the right field. It was a nervous day. My parents came out from Ohio, and some other relatives came out from Arizona, and it was just one of those days, a Wednesday afternoon game, maybe 500 people at Candlestick Park. I walked the first hitter, which was Tim Raines, and it was a strike three. It was a full count right in the outside corner. And I'll never forget Bruce Framing, who was umpiring behind the plate. And of course, me with my little ragged mouth sometimes when I pitched, I'd said, "Where was it? Where was it?" And he took his mask off and he says, "It was a ball, rookie, and you don't have anything to say to me. Okay, you throw it, I'll call it." And man, I was just like, wow, this is the big leagues. He's a big league umpire. And I didn't say a word after that, but it turned out where I went 6 1/3 innings. I had given up no hits, and then Al Oliver ended up getting his first hit. And the whole key was trying to go 9 innings. That was what our mindset was back in the 80s when you pitched. You didn't want to see a bullpen pitcher. You wanted to complete the game. And in the ninth inning, I got in a little trouble, and Don McMahon came out and said, "This is your game, pal. You're going to win it or lose it." And I ended up getting him out and ended up throwing that three-hit shutout, and it was remarkable. I had a lot of press going all over me, and something that the Giants never had was a top rookie. John Montefusco was probably the other one that really opened up eyes as a rookie, and I kind of succeeded him.
And that must have felt great as far as a young pitcher getting that boost of confidence from your pitching coach that, hey, we're not out here to take you out. This is suck it up, finish the game, and to get through that, I'm sure was a huge moment for you.
It was good. It was something that I needed. It was something, that little boost that you want to hear to finish the game. And at that point, hey, I'm a rookie. I have no idea what's behind me, who's coming out of the bullpen. Of course, we had a great bullpen with Minton and Lavelle. And it was a trust factor. It was what Frank told Don to come out and tell him, finish this game, push him. And it really opened up Frank's eyes to give me the confidence to be a starter the rest of the year.
Do you remember who your first major league strikeout was?
No idea. It would have to be. It wasn't with the Dodgers. I know that it had to have been in that Expo game.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Tim Raines.
The second time around, it had
I
to be
think it
because
was
I
Tim
walked
Raines.
him the
Yeah,
first time.
yeah.
I know
Now,
that.
and he also did get one of his 1,571 stolen bases off you that game, so he got a little bit of revenge. But yeah, hey, still, that's still not a bad thing.
And it ended up being my own shutout in my career. So that was even the
Yeah.
better part of it.
Well, and you look at the lineup you faced that day. There's some pretty memorable names. Two Hall of Famers in Raines, Andre Dawson, career 300 hitter who would win the NL batting title the next season. Al Oliver, you mentioned him. And then Tim Wallach, who was just a young player, but he'd go on and hit 28 home runs that year. So, I mean, not an easy lineup for you to be thrown in there for your first major league start.
Well, Scott, the key about that game is when I was with the Royals, we played in Omaha, and where the Expos played were in Denver. So we got to see a lot of them in the American Association. So I saw a lot of these guys in AAA, the Tim Wallachs, the Tim Raines, Razor Shines. There was
Wow.
so many guys that we faced. And of course, in Denver, we played in Mile High Stadium with a big white horse out in right field. And the ball used to fly out of that ballpark, but they would pack them in. That was really one of the first ballparks where I pitched, where they had 30,000 people. I mean, they would pack them for AAA games. And they had a good team. The Expos always had a good minor league system. And there it was. They were all in the big leagues when I first got my start.
Wow. Well, so that had to be the beginning of what must have been a dream rookie season for you. I mean, you lost your next two starts, both of which were quality starts, by the way,
Yeah.
but proceeded to be one of the most effective pitchers in the league that year. You won a team high 13 games, and the team won 18 of the games that you appeared in overall. Led the team with a 3.14 ERA. That was 14th best in the majors. Topped the rotation, 189 innings thrown, seven complete games. I mean, just unheard of today. And I'm not sure how much this stat was used back then, but your whip was 1.21, and that was also the best on the team. So, I mean, how did you process that? You'd wanted this goal for so long, you get in there and you had a very successful first season in the big leagues.
One of the things I did, Scott, every time I played, I never looked at statistics overall. I would look at what I just did and look at the game that I just pitched and what I could get better. I always did that. I never looked at comparing myself to another pitcher. I would always go to what I just did. What did I do bad? What did I do to correct it? How could I get better? Was my spin on my slider sharp? Was the curveball off speed enough? I had an okay changeup, but I threw it just to show it. My sinker and slider were my money pitches, and those were the two pitches I had to get over at all different times. So once I processed that, I never wanted to go look at scouting reports because we used to have ex-players would be in the stands, retired, drinking beer, and scouting. And after I started reading these scouting reports, I'm like, what are these guys even watching? Oh, we don't throw this guy a slider. Don't throw him a fastball. And I'm like, there's no way I can believe this. So I started doing my own scouting, and it was through the Sporting Green. I used to get the box score out.
Wow.
If I'm pitching the Dodgers the next time out, I would watch the Dodgers game in that box score 4 days ahead of my start. And I would literally write down what they did. Steve Sachs, he was 2-3, 2 for 3, 1 for 3, 2 for 2. He's the hottest guy in the lineup. That's how I prepared for my starts. I still think about it, how I did that for many, many years. And in my own mind, I knew who was hot and who wasn't.
Geez, and you think about today where that's come, where they have these iPads in the dugout and they can literally go back and look at the pitch they just saw or
Yeah.
the amount of video and breakdown. It's mind-boggling. In probably some ways, it's probably overwhelming the amount of information that is available to some of these players, but that's where we're at these days.
And I was a young pitcher. I did it myself. And you hear about Kurt Schilling having a book, and you hear about other pitchers having a book in the dugout. I used to have a book in my locker room all the time, writing notes down. And then before I went out to warm up, I would go over those notes with my catcher, and most of the time it was Bob Brenly or Bob Melvin, and we would just go through what I wanted to do because I wanted a sequence to each pitcher or to each hitter. And with that sequence, I wanted them to understand what I was going to throw. Then the second time around, we would talk about it because we wanted to see how they developed throw, if they were right-hander, how they were approaching my top slider. And lefties, how are they hitting that sinker away? If they were trying to pull it, if they were trying to push it. Those are the things that I had to make adjustments on the second and third time up. Those are things you just talk to your catcher about. And you had faith, and I had a lot of faith in Bob Bramlett. I had Milton May when I first came up. And they had encyclopedias also. They used to watch hitters all the time. You saw, Buster Posey do it so much. And I always elaborated about him looking at hitters and watching where their hands are, watching where their feet are, because hitters used to adjust. A great story. I interviewed Keith Hernandez on one of my shows. And I said, Keith, how did you hit me so well? I mean, he demolished me, 300 hitter. He goes, you know what I used to do? I used to stand out away from the plate, which he did. Right when you get your knee up, I would go up to the plate and look for that sinker away, and I'd hit it to left field. And I was like, damn, I never saw that. Never saw him do that. And now I'm thinking about it. He hit a lot of my sinkers to left field, which you're supposed to. And he also drilled a couple balls to right center field on off-speed pitches. But see, those are some of the secrets hitters did that you don't remember. And it was great. I mean, I was sitting here listening to them talk about me, and I'm like, damn, why didn't I see that when I was facing them? But games people play, right?
Yeah, the cat and mouse between the pitcher and hitter. I mean, that part probably hasn't changed. So
It's interesting, but it's as you said, analytics have played so much into knowledge of the game now, and you talked about the iPad where pitchers can see how hitters are reacted to them right after they get out of the inning.
yeah,
It's immense. It's so much information. Same thing with hitters when you see hitting coaches showing them the reliever coming in. Here's his pitches. Here's what he likes to throw into sequence. Man, that's information you can't give up. Those are things that a hitter as a pitcher are established to help you. And I think that's what they're doing more of.
yeah, absolutely. So, with all that success on the downside, there was another moment that should have been a great achievement for you that season, which was playing in the 1982 All-Star game. Ironically, played in Montreal. Here they are again. But can you tell us a little bit of the story of what happened there and why you didn't make it to that All-Star game?
Well, I did make the team. I was
Right.
called in with Greg Minton. Both of us were in Frank Robinson's office when he told us both were selected to be on the All-Star team. Tommy Lasorda did do that. And I had a real good season going. I think I was 7-2 with, under a 3-point earned run average. And they were both, next thing you know, a ring guy came in and sized us for our all-star rings. Of course, back then it looked like a high school ring, but it was something I was excited about. And we were ending in Montreal of all things. So my parents had booked a flight, my relatives booked a flight. They were all going to come up to Montreal to see the all-star game. And when we first landed there, it was like a 4-day trip. We flew in there on an off day. And the very first day, it was 3 games left. I had just got done pitching in Philly. And we were in batting practice, and Murph came out to an outfield and said, "Hey, Frank wants to talk to you in his office." And he said, "Tommy Lasorda's on the phone." And I'm walking in with Murph, and I said, "What do you think this is about, Murph?" And he goes, "I think it's probably to see if you can pitch an inning or whatever." So I'm going in there going, "Great, this is great news, finding out what's happening." As I get in there, he had it on the speakerphone. And he said, Tommy Lasorda wants to talk to you. And I go, okay, what's up, Tommy? And he goes, how you doing, Bill? I'm doing great. Great first half, a sensational first half. But I want to ask you a favor. And I said, what's that? And I'm thinking he's going to say, you want to pitch an inning? I don't want you to pitch an inning. He goes, well, Phil Niekro is retiring. And he's having a decent year with the Braves. And I'm wondering if you'll give up your spot for Phil Niekro. And I said, my spot on the All-Star team? And he goes, yeah, you'll make the All-Star team many years. You're going to have a successful career, but I need to know an answer. And I go, well, I don't want to answer this right now. Let me think about it. He goes, well, we can't think about it. You have to give me an answer. And I looked over to Frank, and Frank was nodding his head. I said, what do you think, Frank? Frank goes, I'm not going to get in the middle of this. This is your decision. This is what you are going to make the decision on. Well, I said to Tommy, let me think about it. I'll get back to you. I said, I really got to think about this. Is my parents are coming. Oh, we'll pick up all the flights. We'll pick up all the expenses. Anything that's out of your pocket, we'll definitely pick up. But I really want Phil Niekro to be on this all-star team. Well, good guy Bill said, okay, go ahead, do it. It's fine. I'm fine with it. And at that moment, I walked out and we were coming in from batting practice, and Jack Clark, Darrell Evans were wondering what the hell was going on. And they kind of cornered me in the clubhouse and they asked me, and I said, yeah, I let Phil Nuker do it. And they were so upset at Frank. They were so upset at me. They were more mad than I was because I really didn't know what the hell I did. I
Yeah.
was a rookie. I wasn't even in the league 3 months. So in hindsight, yeah, the nice guy did it, but I never had another chance to make the All-Star team. They had talked about it during the game because I was back in Foster City here watching it, and they had talked about it on the game. And my parents didn't know what to think. They didn't know if I did the right thing or wrong thing. Um, in the end, maybe I should have just said no and made the All-Star team and had it on my resume the rest of the year. It's a story that Greg Minton and I still talk about because Moon Man was really upset at me. But in the long run, I did it. I opened my mouth and agreed to it, and now I live without any all-star selections on my resume.
Wow. Well, I mean, on one hand, obviously a huge disappointment and perhaps regret is the word, but on the other hand, what a gracious gesture in the intent of doing what you thought was right. And
Mhm.
especially, I can imagine that circumstance when you're a young kid. Phil Niekro, this legend, Tommy Lasorda, I hate to say it, but a legend. Um,
Right. And
I can
the
definitely
other thing
understand.
too, Scott, the other thing, Phil ended up pitching for another 6 years. That's the thing that really pissed me off.
Of course he did. Oh my goodness. Well, way more positive moments that season than the negative, but there's one in particular, of course, that also stands out. October 3rd, 1982 against the Dodgers, the last game of the
Yeah.
season. A game that you actually started. Going into this, I wasn't aware of that.
Hmm.
6 innings, gave up just 2 runs, a home run to Ronce. You also knocked in a run on a double play ball to tie the game in the second inning. But of course, that's not what everybody remembers. Joe Morgan, the seventh inning, the 3-run
Yeah.
homer off Terry Forster to knock the defending champion Dodgers out of the race. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start with you with all of that, but just tell us some of your memories about that day going into that game, and from getting the start to the dramatic finish in the end.
It really started that weekend because Atlanta was playing San Diego. And if we would have won 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers, we had a chance to be the NL West champs.
Yeah.
On Friday, it was a battle. We had a battle going on, and Fred Brining was pitching, and he was pitching a great game. I'm thinking he got into the seventh inning. I might be wrong, but they had bases loaded, and we had the lead. And Al Holland was warming up, and they had called Rick Monday as the pinch hitter. And we're like, oh, great, great job, Fred, bringing Al Holland. There's 2 outs. And Frank's walking to the mound, and I'll never forget this. Atlee and I go, great job, Fred, man. What a great job. Friday night, ballpark packed. We got the lead. Al Holland will come against Rick Monday. And all of a sudden, Frank comes walking off the mound. He never made the pitching change. And we're like, what? What are you doing? Fred's done. Well, 2 pitches later, Rick Monday hit a grand slam,
Mm.
and it just knocked us complete. We were baffled at the call. We didn't even understand what Frank was thinking. Al Holland was so upset. He was throwing stuff in the locker room. He was so mad. We were all mad because we wanted to win that game, and Freddie did his best he could. Well, the next game we got beat like 14-2.
I was at that game.
We didn't even come
Yeah.
close in that game. So it sets up Sunday, the final game of the year, and I was scheduled to pitch. And everybody knew that if we beat the Dodgers, we would knock them out. The Padres had won earlier, so it was down to us beating the dreaded Dodgers. And one of the cool things that happened was Don McMahon was, one of my best pitching coaches. He would just make you laugh, joke around. He'd say one-line words and everything. So I'm warming up in the bullpen. And as you remember, the tunnel where people would come out, that's where the other team would come out. And I'd always face Fernando. Fernando and I went at each other maybe 8 times. I think I beat him 5 or 6 times, but we always had battles. He threw at me, I threw at him. It was just that one good battle when I always faced the Dodgers. And sure, he comes out and his pitching coach was with him and a couple other people, and he starts screaming at me in Spanish. I didn't know Spanish. I knew a few words. And I see Don McMahon running over to him, and he's just screaming at him in Spanish. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So he comes back, and I got done warming up, and we're walking back into the dugout. I said, Don, what the hell did he say? Why'd you get so upset? He said, Laskey, you're going to choke today. We're going to kick your ass. And I said, what did he said that? He goes, yeah. And I go, okay, all right, we're on now. Game on. So, I mean, that just put more fuel in the fire. I threw the real ball really well. Gave up a home run to Say. I think I retired like 15 or 16 in a row after that before I got in trouble. Lavelle came in, and of course Mooney came in, and he threw an inning and 2/3. But the home run by Joe Morgan definitely sparked it, gave us the lead.
Flip one in there somewhere. Come on. Get on there, we'll beat him. Come on.
The 1-2 pitch. Morgan belts it high and deep right field. Way back goes Monday to the fence. It is gone. Home run, Joe Morgan. And the Giants lead the Dodgers 5-2.
The one big thing I remember in that game was there were so many people jumping on the field because we beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers had to come through our tunnel through the locker room.
Oh, jeez.
And when we're seeing all this, we're all high-fiving each other because we beat the Dodgers. And here they come through our locker room. And boy, did we were throwing obscenities at Tommy Lasorda and everybody else in that locker room. They were walking in with their head down, and we were just screaming obscenities at them. Get out of here, go home, go to the Bahamas. You're going home with us. A lot of things like that I remember, but it was a rewarding game for me. It was one of the games that I finished the season fantastic. As you said, I had 13 wins. I had six one-run losses in that season. I could have easily come close to winning 19 or 20, which would have been a topper. But overall, I went home and saw my parents. I always went back to Toledo. And it was just one of those years you look back at now, 50 years ago, it seems like, but you remember certain parts of that season.
Boy, I wish there was a closed caption video of that procession going through your guys' locker room. That would be priceless.
It was fun.
So
Anytime you beat the Dodgers and, they ask me all the time, is the rivalry still there? I think it is. But back in Candlestick days, there were so many fights in the stands, people burning pennants. The hate was there. I mean, and you don't want to say the word hate, but it was the rivalry. It was like that crosstown high school rivalry. When you watched this, when you looked at the schedule, you knew when you were playing the Dodgers in LA or at Candlestick, and you were ready for it. Every player was ready for those games.
yeah, I mean, knocking out the defending world champions too. I mean, that just had to be a little extra special. So another special aspect about that 82 season is it was the 25th anniversary of the Giants coming to San Francisco, and there was lots of pomp and circumstance to celebrate that, including having a lot of these legendary players come back to Candlestick. So, I mean, how was it as a rookie player seeing so much history of the game and being able to interact with some of these legends like Mays McCovey, Marichal Cepeda, wearing the same uniform as you did?
Well, if you remember, Scott, they used to have the old timers game back then, and that's where they all would
Yes.
come out and put their uniform on. You had Willie Mays playing center field. You had McCovey playing first. Marichal would throw, and we would be out there like little kids watching them, and they were having a ball. They were just having a great time. But in our locker room at Candlestick, we used to have picnic benches, and they would be assorted all around the clubhouse. And Marichal would come in, and all the pitchers would go sit and listen to all his stories. Mays would come in, outfielders would go talk to him. That's what was so great about the storytelling. That's how we got to know these guys. McCovey was always in there, Marichal, Gaylord Perry would jump in there. But when they started talking, you had to go sit there and all ears glued to them and all the stories and great players and Hall of Famers that they faced. And Willie Mays would always say, I'll take you to right field, Laskey. You throw that slider, I'll take you to right field all day. And I'm like, okay, all right, yeah, I hear you. McCovey would say, you couldn't throw that sinker to me. I'd take you out to left field. It's the kind of bantering we did. That was baseball. That was fun stuff. And it wasn't about me against you. It was just the one-liners that got you to be relaxed around them. And all those guys became good friends of mine. And it's just so sad that we're seeing them all pass away because they were fantastic Giants. And as you always hear, forever Giants. And they mark that distinctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so tell us a little bit about, playing at Candlestick Park. You hadn't had a lot of experience playing in other major league stadiums when you first came up, so beginning your career there had to be a little bit of an adventure. What were your first impressions of coming into
Yeah, I
that
don't
park
think
and
the
playing there?
cold, Scott, it used to be cold and windy, and I grew up in Ohio. So in the springs, it was always cold and windy in the spring. So that really didn't hurt me. It was just the winds when balls would be hit for fly balls. You just didn't know if somebody was going to catch them or not. You were constantly backing up. And the room in from right field to left field, uh, how much room you had on the sidelines where guys would go and catch foul balls. Catchers would go back to the net and catch balls that you never thought you had a chance with. Some of the things it was difficult, especially the Friday night winds and the cold and wrappers flying everywhere, and you couldn't really blow on your hand. You'd have to step off the mound then and do it. So it was at times difficult to get pitch selection and get your fingertips on the ball the correct way. But overall, it was a tough place to pitch. It really was. And some pitchers were really good at it. Other pitchers struggled. It was really, I kept saying, go through 6 innings, get through 6 innings. That was my goal. And if I got more than 6 innings, I did my job. Those were things that at Candlestick, at your home ballpark, you knew the visiting teams didn't want to be there. After 3 games, they were running out of that ballpark and they had to walk across the ballpark to go to the restroom. They had to walk across the ballpark to go to the clubhouse. And they always had parkas on and it was cold for both of us, but we learned how to pitch and play in it. But people just didn't understand. It was difficult to hit there, feel there, pitch there, but it was our home and we made it that way.
Yeah, that's the line I love. It may have been a dump, but it was our dump.
It's true. And, I go by there a lot going to the city and it's not there anymore.
I
But
know.
I remember pulling off that exit so many different times and seeing the wind and how cold it was. I used to live in Foster City and I had a little convertible and I'd have my convertible on. And once I hit the airport, I was like, man, it's getting a little cool out here. By the time I got to Candlestick, I was freezing. So
Yeah.
very seldom I put the top down going in there during the middle of the day. It was mostly in the morning. And then I knew in the afternoon I had the top down. But you know what? You can't forget memories. You can't forget about Candlestick Park. And it was a big part of my career.
So on to the namesake topic of our podcast, the beloved or not, polyester uniforms from that 1982 season. I'm guessing that style of uniform for you may have been prevalent in the minors. It seems like a lot of the teams were wearing those in the 70s and the 80s at that point, but you wore them in your rookie season with the Giants before the team switched back the next year to the more traditional button-up and belts on the pants. But what are your memories, good or bad, of those polyester pullovers? Excuse me.
I think the biggest thing, Scott, I didn't know better. I was a rookie. They gave me a jersey, said my name on it, and I was happy the hell to wear it.
Yeah.
I think that was the main thing. And as you have them behind the creams and the blacks and the orange, that bright orange was huge when we'd wear it. But the black, as I was telling you, when we went on the road, would wear it, and it was hot as hell. But I keep going back to my rookie year. I didn't give a damn if it was wool because that's what they used to wear in the
Yeah.
60s. I had a uniform. I was in the major leagues, and I was happy to wear it.
Yeah, very, very understandable. Well, your career goes well beyond the polyester era. Headed into the next season, 1983, new uniforms, new season. Once again, you lead the team with 13 wins. You were NL Pitcher of the Month in May, going 6-0. But the team's performance overall kind of started to drop off in those next few years. What do
Yeah.
you think kind of contributed to that drop off after such a strong and promising 1982 season?
Well, I think as always, the offense sputtered. We never got a lot of runs. We never get a lot of big hitters in the lineup. Ended up Jack Clark being traded. Different managers. A revolving door was from Frank Robinson to Danny Ozark to Jimmy Davenport, then to Roger Craig. Too many leaders, too many voices, too many people complaining. 82, 83, 84, it was good years. 83, I ended up pulling my lat just like a couple other pitchers did, and they shut me down in September because we were out of the race, and they felt that I'd had enough, and I had won 13 games. Who knows how many I would have won because I got out in the whole month of September. I probably missed 4 or 5 starts after that. Then it just started, going backwards instead of forward. We weren't adding players. Players were leaving free agency, lost a lot of players. Joe Morgan got traded in 83 to the Phillies. Al Holland did too. So there was new faces, there was new voices. It just never came to fashion until Roger Craig ended up turning it around after 85. I was there in 86 as a bullpen arm, and then I moved on, and they ended up proceeding to have some great years.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, even going to 1984, you were the workhorse of the staff again. 200 innings pitched. You finished second in wins behind Kruko. But again, that kind of slide continued. I know Frank Robinson was fired that year in August, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming it just kind of felt like the boulder was continuing to roll downhill at that point.
The whole thing it was just not a cohesive team. There was a lot of guys split on, who's playing, who's not playing, who's pitching, who's not pitching. It wasn't a whole unit.
1985 season, you were there roughly the first half of the year. Respectable numbers, 19 starts, 3.55 ERA. But then, yes, as you mentioned, traded with Scott Thompson to Montreal. You know, did it catch you off guard that you were going, and how did it feel about playing in a baseball market outside of the U.S.?
It really did catch me off guard. And that year I was 1-11 at one time. And I had won 4 straight, and I just beat the Dodgers in LA. And of course, I went out and had a couple cold beverages and got home late. And my phone rang at 5 in the morning. And I picked it up, and it was Tom Haller. He was the general manager. And he says, "You need to come up to the presidential suite. What floor? Blah, blah, blah. You need to come up here immediately." And I'm saying to myself, what the hell did I do last night? I didn't know what the hell I did. I was like, wait a minute here. I just won. There couldn't be something I did wrong. So as I'm getting out of my room, going down the hallway, here's Scott Thompson at the elevator, and I'm looking at him. He's looking at me, and I go, "What are we doing?" He goes, "Did you get a call from Haller?" And I go, "Yeah." And as we get in the elevator, we're going up. Scotty goes, "I think we got traded." And I go, "No way. I just won four straight. There's no way I got traded." We got up there, and that's where Jimmy Davenport was, Tom Haller, Bob Lurie. And they said, we made a trade. We picked up Dan Dreesen from Montreal. Montreal needs some pitching. Bill, you're going to go there. You might be in a starting rotation. You may be part of it. Montreal was in the hunt at that time, and they wanted Scott Thompson as a defensive first baseman as well as a left-handed pinch hitter. Well, it doesn't hit you until it's done. And it was a shock to me. And I'm like, wow, I got traded. I didn't see it coming. And then we had to be in Pittsburgh because that's where Montreal was playing. So we had to fly home. Scotty had two boys. He had his whole family had to pick up and go, but he was from Pennsylvania. So it was easier for him to get everybody to go back home. But for me, I was single. I had no clue what to do. I just packed up my luggage like I was going on a road trip, flew to Pittsburgh. And from there on, Buck Rogers really didn't use me. They had a great starting staff from Scott Sanderson, Dave Palmer, Brian Smith. It was just a solid team, but I was in a draft or I was in a trade that as an extra arm. And when I got there, I didn't pitch much, and my numbers were just, putrid. I can tell you right now, I couldn't get anybody out. The ballpark was okay. You just didn't. It wasn't a baseball friendly fan base. It was more hockey back then
Yeah.
because Montreal, of course, the Canadiens were a great hockey team, and they used to have glass partitions all around the field. So you really couldn't talk to fans unless you went through a glass partition. And that was kind of strange. It was different. The ballpark would play different. The ballpark would fly in day games because the ceiling was open. At night times, it was pretty cold there too. A different ballpark, a different way of living, a beautiful city. I always tell people if you want to make a vacation, go to Montreal. I used to walk
It
around the
is.
city, the cathedrals, and all the different places, arts and crafts. It was one of the most prettiest cities I've ever been to. Toronto's the same way. But it wasn't made for me. There was no question. I wasn't part of it. It was like a nightmare for me, to tell you the truth, because I did have a good season going on with the Giants, and I got flushed by going to Montreal. So at the end of the year, Murray Cook was their GM, and he called me in. It was the end of September, and he said, "Look, this wasn't a good move for you. You're a lot better pitcher than what you did here. So Buck Rogers wants to stick with his rotation. So if he was coming back, he would make a trade and trade me again." And I thought that was very stellar of Murray Cook. And what did he do? He traded me back to the Giants of all teams.
I know.
And that surprised me and that happened right after the season. And sure, I was excited. I was right back home.
Yeah.
But I was not in the rotation. I was in the bullpen as a long man, middle man. And that proceeded to me to get pushed out of the rotation because I never really started after that. I was more of a bullpen pitcher.
And I saw you got your first career save that season at Wrigley Field, which is kind of cool,
Mm-hmm.
of all places.
Finally, when Al Rosen cut the cord, Jimmy Davenport was let go. Roger Craig was brought in, and he brought a whole new nucleus of how he wanted to run a team. And one of the biggest things he said is Candlestick Park's the coldest ballpark we play in, but we're not going to complain about it. This is our park. This is how we're going to play. And he tried to change a lot of things in that little half a year he was there, but it just wasn't there. And then, like I said, the pitching staff changed. He brought in some pitchers from Detroit where he was a pitching coach. Juan Berenguer, Roger Mason, a couple guys that like that. And he wanted to have that every pitcher would throw that split finger. And that's where he and I kind of hit heads. I could not throw that split finger. And I told him about 100 times I didn't want to blow up my shoulder, blow up my elbow. I was three quarters, and you had to be more 12 o'clock when the good pitchers. Scotty Gereltz had a good one. Mike Scott had a good one. Of course, Jack Morris. And if you look at where their arms slotted, it was almost at 12 o'clock. And the fingers would come straight down, and that's where the ball would move. And at that time, he wanted people to throw it. And a lot of pitchers tried. A lot of pitchers used it as a secondary pitch. But every time I threw it, it was hurting my shoulder. And eventually, he got rid of me, and I moved on to Cleveland. And after that, pretty much out of the big leagues.
Yeah. 1987, 1988, between AAA and Cleveland, you're back pitching in Ohio. Just how was that experience for you to get to go back and kind of go back to home and finish
Yeah,
out that
it was
portion.
fun. It was fun, and I pitched with Detroit. Never got a chance to play in Tiger Stadium until I was with Cleveland, and Detroit was my team. That was the team that got me in love with baseball. Al Kaline, Mickey Lolich, Denny McLain, that whole '68 team. I remember that whole World Series. But going to Cleveland, I went to Kent State, so I used to go watch a lot of Tribe games. We'd drive over there and watch games, and of course, back then Cleveland Stadium had 90,000 people that had seats in there, and you wouldn't even get 5,000 people there. So it was strange. It was cold. Opportunities came. We had a veteran bullpen, but we were in the thick of it in the American League. We were in first place for part of that whole year up until about the middle of June, and then we just kind of hit a slump too. Tom Candiotti, John Farrell was our top pitchers. We had a pretty good pitching staff, and then you had Joe Carter, Mel. Trying to think,
No
Mel. I can't
Hall.
think of his. Yep, Mel Hall, Pat Tabler, Alan Ashby. I mean, Alan Allenson. There were some guys back then that we had a very good Indian team. And at the end of the year, I got sent down to AAA along with a couple other guys. We pitched down there in Colorado Springs for a couple weeks, and then we came back up. And at the end of September, it was that time where they wanted to move a lot of pitchers, bring up some young pitchers, and they released some of us in September. We still got paid, of course, but we didn't get the service time. It was just a remarkable job to get back into big leagues, to be in the American League. I got my only save there, pitching against the Brewers when I got Robin Yount and Paul Molitor out, and I was pretty pleased with that. So I had a save in each league. It was just a rewarding experience to be back in the big leagues and to pitch with the Indians.
Yeah. Well, just as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to just pivot back quickly. I mean, two of your teammates during those polyester years and after were Dwayne Kuiper and Mike Krukow, and I've heard them talk about how as players they would sit at the end of the bench during games and mock broadcast these games that they weren't playing. I mean, did you ever witness this personally?
Oh
And
yeah, they did
would
it
you
all the
ever have
time.
thought these
They did
guys?
it all the time, and they did it with bats where they were microphones. So if you look at a bat at the end there where the knob was, that
Yeah.
was the microphone, and they'd go back and forth, play by play, and then they'd make some funny remarks. They're the same way. They're hilarious. And back then, I knew Kipe wanted to get into broadcasting, and Kruk was more just the class clown. He always had games being played and pitchers hitting, but he always was that way. He was never a guy that would, get down on you or get down on the team. He was more that guy that had that uplifting guy, always trying to pump us up. And he came over in '83 where Atley and I were really the top rookie pitchers, and he kind of took the lead there. And at times it helped us because he was taking the lead as the number one pitcher, and then we were pushed back to 2 and 3. But we just didn't have any offense back then, and that was probably one of the biggest reasons why we couldn't win. Some of the pitchers we had were very good. Moonman Minton was an outstanding reliever. Gary Lavelle and Al Holland was there, and Jim Barr, and on and on and on. But overall, Kruk and Kipe, they haven't changed. I see them, when I go to the ballpark now, and we laugh and joke, and they've been great. They've been great on television. They're forever Giants and two of the best announcers in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's half amusing and probably more than half painful when you talk about not having offense when you've traded a player like Jack Clark. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of boggles the mind.
Yeah, Jack was that kind of guy, man. He was a ripper. He'd come in with his styling sweatsuits on. He had a Rolls Royce back then and Corvettes. He had all the money flowing with cars. He had a beautiful wife with mink coats. He was the dude. He was just the dude that came in and everybody goes, Jack's here. He'd come in, do his own thing, go out there and rip and roar. But he had the funniest things when he'd hit a fly ball that would be out of ballparks. He would just come in and cussing at Candlestick. The Winds, they got me again. That would have been another home run. And we'd laugh. We'd be sitting there with our hands. We were just laughing at Jack getting so pissed off because he ripped the shit out of the ball, but he didn't get anything but an F7 or an F8. So
Yeah.
good guy. I still in touch with him. He lives out in Boston now. And he was that stud, though. He was that type of guy that you always just wanted to take a look every time he came up to the bat.
Yeah, and he did get the Dodgers himself a couple years after that, so I guess that's worth it in its own. No, that's fantastic. And although your playing career eventually ended like they all do, you haven't just been sitting around. You've been involved in coaching at the high school level for several different organizations. You've crafted a very successful broadcasting career on television and radio. And perhaps maybe most fun of all, you've led and organized these fantasy camps for a long time. I mean, tell us about these new careers and some of these things that you've been involved in for the past few
Yeah,
decades.
the careers in broadcasting really came down, as everybody knew, and back then, Vita Blue and I were best friends. We just became good friends after baseball. We did a lot of events together, and we just kicked it. It was like I'd pick them up, and we'd drive, go to these events, and do things. And we were at a bocce ball tournament. That was when John Madden had it. It was a
Oh yeah.
bocce ball
Yep.
tournament, and the Giants would bring us there, and they'd put us jerseys on. I remember Milky Cabrera. We had the milkman hats. We would all dress like that, and all of a sudden, Comcast came up to us. Ted Griggs came up and said, "Did you guys ever do TV? Have you ever did radio?" And Vita's like, "What? We would never be like that." And then Ted Griggs, well, I'm doing Comcast. We're just starting the station. I think you guys would be good at it." And I looked at Vita and I'm like, "That's a lot of work, Vita. We've never did TV before." And then Vita looked at Ted Griggs and said, "Are you going to pay us for that?" And Ted goes, "Oh yeah, we're going to get paid. You're going to get paid pretty well." And he goes, "Okay, we're in." And my neck swerved and I go, "What? What did you just say?" And he goes, "Oh, we're going to try it. We're going to try it." So long story short, we go in, we do a little broadcast, kind of a training. Our first show, Greg Papa is the great Greg Papa. And he gets on and he does an open and he talks for 3 to 4 minutes. And we'll be right back with Bill Laskey and Vita Blue. And we go to break and I look over to the camera and I'm go, "Where's the prompter? Where did you read that?" And he goes, "I didn't read anything. That's just me talking." And I looked at Vita and I go, "Get the hell out of here. We got to get the hell out of here. There's no way we can do this." Well, we ended up doing it for 7 years. We
Yeah.
ended up doing two World Series. We got hired in 2011. We ended up doing 2012, 2014, pretty much a lot of the season, 90 to 100 games. We ended up doing a parade. Really fun memories with my good friend Vita Blue and Greg Papa, and I'll never forget those memories. Vita didn't want to do it after 7 years. I ended up doing it a couple more years with different hosts from Pat Burrell to Tim Flannery to Sean Estes. Even Randy Wynn was there. And then after 9 years, KNBR got a hold of me and said we would be interested to see if you wanted to do the postgame show on weekends. And I go, "What does that entitle?" And we went on and on and on. So I went back to the TV and I sat down with the heads there and I said, "Look, I want to do this radio thing on KNBR. It's on every weekend. I'll have my own show." And they said, "Well, you either choose radio or TV because we can't move, series because they come in for series. So it'd be 3 games, 6 games, or whatever." And he goes, "Bill, we're just going to move on. We'll probably do some things with some World Series champions." So I moved on to KNBR. Now I've been on KNBR more than 10 years because I
Wow.
used to do the sport phone shows after games and most of the talk shows. And then Vita and I did a 3 year Saturday show. It was called On
Right.
the Hill with Vita and Bill. It was a blast. We did 3 hours and ended up going to Sacramento. I was doing Sacramento Rivercat TV games on every other Saturday. And that's kind of got me into the broadcast part. But the KNBR show has now opened up more and more. I'm doing more Sports Phone 680 post game shows during the week. And the following is following me. They like how I talk, and I talk honest. I don't rip them, but I just question on some of the negative things that happen during a game. But also, I brag about them when they do well. So the show's been going great. I've been enjoying doing it. And this is my 6th year with extra inning post game show. And, it's turned into something that I really enjoy. And I look at it as a blessing. I look at the age I am, and I'm still active in Major League Baseball. And I can't be more fortunate than doing that.
That's a fantastic transition from somebody who had a fantastic career. And I know a lot of Giants fans enjoy your perspective and having you back involved and around in the area and talking about the Giants. So, I mean, just, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, reliving some of these memories about, what I feel is certainly one of the most exciting areas in Giants baseball. And just want to thank you for taking the time to share some of these perspectives and memories and for taking the time to be our first guest here on Polyester Giants. So thank you, Bill.
Scott, I appreciate you inviting me. Good story tells, some great stories, and thank you again for inviting me and successful with this. This should be fun for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, and we hope to talk to you again sometime.
Thanks, Scott. Have a good day.